Take life seriously. Never take yourself too seriously. I have, so Doug, Julie, Laura, board, I want to commend you. Uh, what you've done truly is extraordinary. I've been to 100 countries, and this could only happen in America. What you're doing right now could only happen in America. Something similar might happen in the UK. They wouldn't be walking around saying, "I love you" to each other. It'd be a little stiffer. That's not a diss for the UK, it's just a cultural thing. Something similar might happen in the Nordic countries, but Europe is not very spiritual these days. That's a generalization, but unfortunately it sticks, given some of their history. America is an extraordinary place. She's not even a country. She's an idea. And we can make her whatever we want. And it is in that vein, the last speaker, who was very good, and I listened to what he was doing with you, and I watched what was happening to you as that experiment was taking place. And I saw you building relationships. And the question, and that Julie confirmed that was sort of the goal of the meeting, one of the goals. And the question is, relationships for what? A reporter came to me once when I was 26 years old. I just founded Operation Hope in 1992 after the Rodney King riots. I was a businessman from age 10 to age 26 before that, but nobody gave me credit for that. They just saw me as a kid, which was fine. First they will ignore you, then they'll criticize you, then they'll copy you, then you win. First they will ignore you, then they'll criticize you, then they'll copy you, and then you win. So, reporter was going to do a profile on our work, and he enticed me by saying it's front page, column left, LA Times, so on and so forth. And I was taken by that, and so we opened our doors to him, books, and what I didn't realize that it was easier to write a bad story than it was to write a good one. It's more interesting and lazy. And so he came to me at the end of the session, and he said, the end of the interviews, he said, I talked to a lot of people. They say, some of your work is really good, and so on and so forth. And he said, just one thing. Some people in the community say that you're sort of a self-promoter. What do you have to say about that? I said, well, that's wrong. They said, well, see, we knew that you'd have something that. So what do you have to say about that? How do you defend yourself? That some people say you're sort of a self-promoter. I said, well, I'm not sort of a self-promoter. I am a self-promoter. I mean, who should I be promoting? I mean, when you went to go get your top of the Times resume, did you tell them somebody else was extraordinary? Did you tell them somebody else won countless awards for writing and journalism excellence? And you've got a very big voice. And I said, the question is not whether you're a self-promoter, but what are you a self-promoter for? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said he was a self-promoter for the drum major instinct. And some of our spiritual leaders and even political leaders, Mandela and Gandhi and others, said they were a self-promoter for essentially the advancement of the human spirit in their own ways. And none of them were appreciated in the moment. No good deed shall go unpunished. In fact, I've redefined that success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Oh, you're out there. I redefine an entrepreneur as somebody who works 18 hours a day to keep from getting a job. You'll get some of this later. Delayed reaction. And I realized with that first reporter that this was not going to be easy, and this was not going to be quick, and this was not going to be framed like a love story. That nothing good comes easy. Love is work. You've been talking about love a lot today. Love is work. Non-love is laziness. And anti-love is evil. Evil exists, but it's very rare. Most people are just lazy. Intellectually lazy, spiritually lazy, emotionally lazy, psychologically lazy, financially lazy. They just don't want to do the work. Let's be honest. You love your wife. You love your husband. You want to divorce at least once a year. It may only last for a moment, but be honest. You're like, I'm out of here. You love your children. You want to throttle them every Tuesday. You love yourself. You divorce yourself if you could. At least once a decade. Maybe if you're honest with yourself, once a month. So love is work. And you cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. It's actually a scientific fact that you cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. What's my point? And why is this convening so important? And why is what was done before I got here so important? And why is relationship building here so important? Because we're sitting in a moment in history. Right now. But history never feels historic when you're sitting in it. It just feels like another day. It takes 20 or 25 years to look back from a moment and reflect back and say, that was historic. And those who are leading those movements in the moment are either criticized or ignored. What did Dr. King, we herald this guy today, but he was called Martin Luther King in his day. Martin Luther Coon. Uncle Tom, these are my credible leaders now. A sellout. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall was his biggest critic. You might assume that he would be his biggest advocate. He maligned this guy to no end. We look at it today and say this guy was a great leader, but he really died chain-smoking, overweight, and depressed. 1968, he thought he'd failed. Rainbows after storms. I wrote 3 books. I'm writing my 4th now. I'm a CEO and an entrepreneur, but I write books when I have time. My first book was really about, and I'm going to sort of get to why I think you're sitting in a moment in history and why you're going to be history makers. My first book was about the global language of money. It's called Banking on Our Future. My second book was about the wealth inside of you, hidden inside of you. It's called Love Leadership, the New Way to Lead in a Fear-Based World. So my favorite chapter in the book was Loss Creates Leaders. Loss creates leaders. Nobody woke up in the morning and said, I want to start a cancer foundation. When I say nobody, I don't mean literally nobody for the cynics here. I mean, generally speaking, nobody gets up and says, I want to start. People who start cancer foundations are those who had somebody who had cancer, loved somebody who had cancer, knew somebody who had cancer. They had cancer. You with me? I'm from the black church. Okay. I have low self-esteem too, so you got it. And the lady, there was a lady who lost her 12-year-old child to a drunk driver, and she was angry at the world, and she railed at God, and she finally threw her hands up and said, okay, I give. What could possibly good come out of this thing? Surrender. She created Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which has arguably changed the world and saved the lives of tens of thousands, if not millions, of young people. So her daughter was not a victim. Her daughter didn't die in vain. Her daughter, in some ways, was an angel, a bridge to something better. That book was about looking inward. And the way I define courage, I was just telling a new friend, Tracy, last night, who works with you guys, that courage is nothing more than your faith reaching through your fear, displaying itself as action in your life. Courage is nothing more than your faith reaching through your fear, displaying itself as action in your life. The third book, How the Poor Can Save Capitalism, is a book that Laura, I sent her and she read, and is the only best-selling book in the world on economics today by a person of color, as it translated into 5 languages. And that book was about the hidden wealth outside of you. Now I'm getting close to why I'm here. Let me and my fourth book will be about, and this is, can't make this up, tapping the real wealth that's real wealth, which is giving people the memo. The book will be called The Memo. What do I mean by that? Half of all success is relationships. You can't make this up. I didn't know what your meeting was about. A quarter of success is understanding money and free enterprise and capitalism. So I was in Jordan with Shimon Peres, and for anybody who can map that out in your brain real quickly, that was pretty cool. I was in Jordan with Shimon Peres. Okay, some of you will get that later. And it was a great meeting, World Economic Forum, and I told him what I was doing. He said, I really commend what you're doing, but John, you will be criticized. And I said, why? He said, because people will not understand this thing you're talking about capitalism, but you tell them this. Even if you want to distribute money like a socialist, you got to first collect money like a capitalist. Pretty cool and pretty accurate. And so I came to the conclusion that a quarter of life was understanding free enterprise, capitalism, opportunity. The new definition of freedom is self-determination, and half of life was relationships. Nobody in here got a big job through Monster.com. I'm willing to bet my net worth on it. Somebody tapped you on the shoulder, made a phone call, sent an email and said, you know, Julie, you know, Jack, you know, I think you could do this thing over here, and Joe and Jack have been talking about this. You know, would you be interested? I see heads nodding, am I right? Would you be interested in doing this? That's relationships. That's relationship capital. That's how the world works. I'm going to dig back into that in a moment. Let me now dig down into, I know you guys like stats and facts, so let me go to some facts that are from my book. 70% of the economy is consumer spending. So let me back this up. 230 recognized countries in the world. Half of those are dictatorships, by the way. So out of 220 countries, what's the largest economy in the world? It's America, even though 55% of Americans, so says Gallup, think it's China. These are highly educated people who basically have been overtaken by fear, thrown their hands up, and have said China's already won. By the way, this happened before. 35 years ago, remember, it was Japan. Some of you are old enough to remember. Everybody's learning Japanese, and I mean, I love Japanese. It's great, but I mean, everybo's, you know, they were buying the Empire State Building and all that kind of stuff, and it was just preordained. We're going to be taken over by Japan. They're going to be 7 trillion. We're going to be 5 trillion in GDP, and then some little kids from Silicon Valley didn't read that memo, didn't read those stats, those facts, decided to reimagine everything and pull $10 trillion of GDP literally out of their rear end. And America today is a $17 trillion economy, 7 billion people in the world, give or take, 350 million people in America. The largest economy in the world is America by far. Take China, take Germany, take Nigeria, take Mexico, take a couple more, put them inside of a bucket together, you still have room. That's how amazing this country is, even after the global economic crisis. But people say, well, this is run by big business. Really? I love facts. They're stubborn things. 70% of the U.S. economy, consumer spending. That's you and me paying car notes and mortgages and paying your employees to go get daycare, and it's going to restaurants. It's coming to this conference. It's paying for plane tickets. It's paying for your hotel room. 70% of this economy. And that's a Federal Reserve number, which means it's pretty conservative. Here's another 70% number. 70% of the entire U.S. population living from paycheck to paycheck. So if you're living in New York City making $70,000 a year, you are struggling to make ends meet. You tell me when I'm wrong. You're living in, Austin, and you're making, $50,000 a year, $40,000 a year, certainly. You're struggling to make ends meet. You're living in Atlanta, Georgia. You're making $45,000 a year. You're struggling to make ends meet. You're living help me out here. You're living in, L.A., and you make $50,000 a year. You are struggling to make ends meet. Bless you. You got too much month at the end of your money. And by the way, this is not black people or Latino people or Asian people or Indian people. These are all people. In fact, the new color is not white, black, red, brown, and yellow. It's some green. In fact, you deal with class, you get race for free. So 70% of all Americans living from paycheck to paycheck. 70% of our economy is consumer spending. And then the next big aha. Well, big business is we got to go get our jobs from Google or HP or wherever. This is a bold-faced lie. 70% of all jobs in America, 500 employees or less. This might be you, by the way. Let me give you let me break that number down a little further. 7 billion people in the world, 350 million people, give or take, in the U.S. And none of these are trick questions, by the way. I'm going to ask you now to help me out here. How many companies in America? I'm just going to give you this number: 26 million. It's just a starting point. No trick questions. How many of the 26 million companies employ one person or more? No trick questions. Sorry? You said 3 million? Okay, I don't know where you got that from, but let's peg that for a minute. We said 10 million? Somebody said all. Okay, I would have said that, right? No. In fact, she's closest. It's 6 million. The rest of them are a result of mergers and acquisitions and their tax structures. And by the way, very interesting factoid. 10 years ago, you know how many companies were traded on both exchanges in the U.S.? Were all the exchanges in the U.S.? I want to get through this pretty quickly, so I may help you with some of the answers if it's not obvious. About 7,500 companies. How many are traded today? About 3,500 companies. I'll come back to that number. Peg that. Back to the numbers. 26 million companies, 350 million people in America, 7 billion people in the world. Out of 26 million companies, how many employ one person or more? 6 million. Very close. Out of the 6 million, this gets very interesting now, how many employ 10,000 people or more? Now, before you answer that question, here's what we tell our children. Go to school K through 12, great, go get a job. Go to K through 12, graduate, then go to college, graduate, great, get some student loans, and go work for a big company or government, neither of which are hiring. And then we wonder why 30% of all kids in America are dropping out of high school. By the way, I don't know if you knew that number. 30% of all kids in the largest economy in the world are dropping out of high school. Not black kids, not Latino kids, I'm talking about all kids. Another striking 70% number, 70% of all black men dropping out of high school today. 70%. So if you're a black parent and you've got a daughter, who's going to marry your daughter? This is a very basic. What happens to black America in 10 years or 20 years if you don't have a family structure? That's another conversation, another speech for another time. But by the way, we're all in this mess together because I've already told you the best number we got is 30%. Back to the statistics. So we tell our kids, go graduate from high school, college, and then go work for a big company or government, neither of which are hiring. 92% of all jobs, private sector, 8% of all jobs, government. Keep that number in your head. Let's go back to now the statistics. Now, how many companies, 6 million, employ one person or more, largest economy in the world, employ 10,000 people or more? 974. And you can name them. HP, IBM, Wells Fargo. The fact that you can name them is a problem. So where are jobs coming from? 18,000 employers employ 1,000 to 10,000 people. That's the industrial plants, not industrial plants, but industrial centers that you see, the one-story tilt-ups where there's no sign on the side of the building. In fact, there may be some of your companies, but that's the crown jewel of America. That's where a lot of growth happens. By the way, all jobs come from startups, shoot-ups, small businesses in years 3 through year 7. That's where all job growth comes from. Then half of all jobs in America are 100 employees or less, and 70% of all jobs in America are 500 employees or less. We are literally looking for love in all the wrong places. We are digging in the wrong holes. Here's another shocking statistic. For the first time since we have been recording business starts at the U.S. Census, we've got more small business deaths than small business births. There are 350,000 small business births in the last census, and there are 400,000 small business deaths. And if we don't turn that around, in 10 years we'll be the UK, the nation that used to lead the world. Because there's never been a world leader that wasn't an economic leader. Are you following me so far? I'm coming really close to your sweet spot. I'm coming right to your doorstep. of why this is historic and why you're so important. So let me jump over, and maybe in the Q&A I can answer some more interesting statistics, because I got a lot that are just mind-blowing about that number. But by the way, when you understand those numbers, you need to go home. If you have a housekeeper, you need to give them a shoulder massage. You need to wash their feet. You need to give them you need to give them some food. Drive them home. Be really nice to them, because they're driving the largest economy on the planet. my rich friends will often say, "Why do I need to pay attention to this?" I say, "Well, you need to help poor people if only to stay rich." Let me go one step further. Every big company was a small one. All wealth in the world, let me make this actually easier, because somebody would debate me because it's corruption. All wealth in America, with the exception of corruption and government contracting, came from poverty. Now, somebody should be actually saying right now, why did you invite this guy? He is criminally insane. This makes no sense. I love pushback. Let's test the theory. Goldman Sachs. It was a guy named Goldman and a guy named Sachs. And they were not prominent people, got off the boat, literally. By the way, why did all the Jews come to America? Because in Europe you couldn't own land. If you were Jewish, you were denied land ownership. So they turned a negative into a positive, rainbows after storms, and created what you call portable wealth. What do you call it today? Finance. And then what did they do with finance? Bought land. But Goldman Sachs was a guy named Goldman and a guy named Sachs. Walmart, literally Sam Walton with a pickup truck and a storefront. UPS was a guy named Jim Casey with $100 and a bicycle. Henry Ford, for all of his personal interesting attributes, really changed America because, and he didn't do this like some moral thing, but he paid his workers double what everybody else was making. By the way, we think, we romanticize it again. Oh, Henry Ford started the automobile industry. No, there was 100 automobile manufacturers the same year he started. But he differentiated himself. He would have been at a conference like this because he was really a thought leader. He differentiated himself, and he doubled his workers' pay. Why? Because he was having churn. Because it was tough work. And he wanted his workers to stick. I know you're having a conversation on the living wages earlier. This is an interesting attribute. So he paid his workers more, and he actually had less churn, which meant that he had more value. And by the way, the bonus was they could now afford to buy the cars that they were making. Boom, you had a middle class. Coca-Cola, created by a pharmacist, sold the formula for $500. In fact, him and his son, they were offered stock, and they said, no, we just want the cash. By the way, the company that took Coca-Cola public, the precursor to SunTrust, it was a banker. He stood at the door and gave all of his best clients, his best customers, relationships, stock. They said, I can't afford to buy the stock. This is before of the SEC. They said, we'll finance it for you, not to worry, we'll finance the purchase of the stock. Just hold on to it. And the company took their $130,000 investment banking fee in stock. Fast forward to 2009, global economic crisis. It hits. SunTrust Banks has a capital call. They go to the stock, $6 billion. Not bad. All wealth came from small enterprises. Bank of America was literally a little Bank of Italy operation out of, the guy was in San Francisco after the earthquakes and the fires, and the word banker comes from banquette, literally the bar top. They would bank on the bar top. And they would give small loans to merchants in San Francisco for $200. People thought this guy is crazy. He'd go door to door giving loans to small business owners. Well, that became what is arguably one of the most conservative institutions in the world, the Bank of America. But it started with a very, what you might call, quote, risky business plan. Are you with me so far? You are American royalty. Because, to quote my friend Van Jones, the best way to stop a bullet is a job. Gallup says the number one issue in the world today, by far, is a job. Not who you pray to, not east or west, not political differentiation. The number one issue in the world is a J-O-B. That's what you're creating. You can do well and do good. You can do well by doing good. We can do more than sit around and wait for our politicians to change the world, because I say, after advising 3 U.S. presidents and being honored by 5, they are not going to change the world. So Mandela, that's not a diss on politicians, by the way, that's just not their job. Mandela became president of South Africa, and my mentor, Ambassador Andrew Young, said, so what are you now going to do for poor people now that you're president? He said, what are you going to make me do? He said, I don't understand. We're in this fight together. We're liberators. He says, no. You're a liberator. I'm now the elected president of South Africa, and I got everybody coming at me. And everybody's got something they're selling, and everybody's got a thing, and I just have to do what's best for the country. What are you going to make me do? Rainbows after storms, and loss creates leaders. And life is 10% what life does to you, and 90% how you choose to respond to it. Let me now contextualize your story with mine. I was born in South Central LA in Compton, California, and my mother told me she loved me every day of my life. My mom and my dad never finished 8th grade education, technically not because they didn't want an education, but because in the southern states, education really was not emphasized in their era. And my mother told me she loved me every day of my life, so I never really had a self-esteem problem. My dad owned his own business for 54 years. So why am I a businessman? It's not because I'm a genius, it's because I was role modeling, right? What I love myself, my mother told me to. It's not rocket science, it's role modeling. So when I was 9 years old, I had a sense of yes, I can and yes, I am. Baker comes in my classroom and teaches me a course in financial literacy. He happened to be Caucasian. It was a blue suit, white shirt, red tie. I remember it was yesterday. He was from Bank of America. And after the second session, I asked the guy, excuse me, sir, what do you do for a living? And how'd you get rich legally? And I was dead serious, because nobody in Compton, California wore suits unless you were a detective, and then it was a bad suit. But nobody wore good suits in Compton, California. Nobody wore a cool suit like this guy. And he said, I'm a banker and I finance entrepreneurs. I said, I don't know what an entrepreneur is, but if you finance them, I'm going to be one. So he told me a little bit more. I quit. I left school, went to the house, and by the way, my eyes now opened up to a whole new world in a whole new way. I saw things differently, and I went to the liquor store owner. This is my neighborhood. The liquor store sold candy. If you can get that in your head. It was Mac's Liquor Store. Mr. Mac, I said, sir, you're selling the wrong kind of candy. 10 years old. Remember what I said? First they will ignore you, then they'll criticize you, then they'll copy you, then you win. So I go there, and I say, sir, you're selling the wrong kind of candy. By the way, you related to Fred Smith? Yeah, you look just like Fred Smith. Fred was my president of Operation Hope, and thank you for being here. So they're my guests. So I said, you're selling the wrong kind of candy. He said, go away, little boy, I've got a college degree. This reminds me of Bill Gates going to talk to the chairman of IBM saying you're in the wrong business. He said, sir, we're the largest company in the world. How dare you? You're here as a favor. You're not even a full-time employee. How dare you tell me what my business is? You're lucky to be here. I'm the biggest company in the world. Get out of here. And he went home in his garage and created Microsoft. Microsoft. Think about this. It was literally instructive. Microsoft. And of course, Microsoft can now buy what is now the PC maker IBM 100 times. Back to the story. The guy tells me I've got a college degree, I know what I'm doing. I said, that's nice, I'm a kid, I've got cavities. I'm telling you, you're selling the wrong kind of candy. God gave you two ears and one mouth, so you listen twice as much as you talk. This guy didn't get the memo. So finally, to shut me up, he agreed to hire me. And he said, well, work at the counter. You got to get for gab. That's the best job I've got. I said, I don't want to work there. I want to work in the back. He said, that's the worst job I've got. That's what I want. I worked as a box boy for 3 weeks and quit. Anybody have any idea why? Which means I needed to do what? What? I told him a theory that he was selling the wrong kind of candy. I had to go into the box room to look at inventory levels to see what was moving and what wasn't, and the best way to know that was to put the inventory on the shelves to see what people were buying from the back. You know, when you go in the front and somebody's pushing in the back, that was me. And I quit 3 weeks later, went home, borrowed $40 from my mother because she wouldn't give me the money. She said, life is tough. and went to Iris. I went to Iris. My mother's a capitalist. Went to Iris food store and went to Smart and Final, and they thought I was a cute project for schools. So they gave me some free racks. I went home, ate through half of the inventory, sold the rest. And the short version is I made $300 a week at 10 years old and put the liquor store out of the candy business. Now, do you know what that did to the endorphins on the right side of my brain? You have any idea what it does to a 10-year-old who just put the liquor store owner out of the candy business? Please put the graph up. You have been lied to for 50 years about what poverty is and what wealth is. You've been completely lied to. This is the truth. The left side of the graph is the book I just wrote, How the Poor Can Save Capitalism. The right side of the graph will be the new book, The Memo. Let's focus on the left side of the graph. Here's what has nothing to do with money, by the way. Zip, zero, nothing. Half of all poverty is low self-esteem and lack of confidence in yourself. Somebody challenged the theory, by the way, because there's no way you can even be here. There's no way you can sit here and have these conversations unless you have personal confidence and self-esteem. There's no way you can run your business or dream up a new dream without confidence and self-esteem in yourself. Yes or no? So half of all poverty is low self-esteem and lack of confidence in yourself. The second part of poverty is role models and environment. I'm going to do this really quick because I want to get to one larger aha and then some solutions and then quit. So role models. I mentioned what my mother and my father did for me, and that's why I became who I am. Think about communities that are underserved, where free enterprise has not gotten there, whether they're white, rural, or black and brown, urban. Kids see, mind you, everybody's aspirational, so kids see as symbols of success, rap stars, athletes, and drug dealers. And then we are surprised that kids grow up wanting to be rap stars, athletes, and drug dealers. They are simply modeling what they see. No different than you did. Why are you who you are? You saw somebody who was a woman doing something and said, I can do that. I don't even know your story, and I know your story. Reasonable? Yes? Yes? We've never met. You saw somebody in your business, said, I can do that. Yes? You saw somebody with a suit on early on. Maybe it was your father. I can do that, right? No, we never met each other. I mean, this is not my theory. This is human nature. Environment. Basically, it means if you hang around 9 broke people, you'll be the 10th. This is funny stuff. It's going right over your heads. Aspiration. This is a code word for hope. The most dangerous person in the world is a person with no hope. If I don't like me, I'm not going to like you. If I don't feel good about me, I'm not going to feel good about you. If I don't respect me, don't expect me to respect you. If I don't love me, I don't have a clue how to love you. And here's a big one. If I don't have a purpose in my life, I'm going to make your life a living hell. Because whatever goes around comes around. Then that leads to opportunity. So if I have crappy self-esteem and crappy confidence and crappy role models and a crappy environment and a crappy sense of hope, I don't see a glass half full. I see it as half empty. I don't see opportunity. I don't even leave my block. I may not even leave my street. Now let me give you some additional context. I'm going to give you a quick little history lesson. I'm going to do this quickly so I can wrap this up. So please excuse me for now talking fast because I want to get to at least a couple questions. Are you enjoying this? Yes. So now let me explain to you black poverty is different from all other poverty. Black American poverty is different from other poverty for this reason. 250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, ending in 1970. Basically where America was, certain people were told, you aren't, because there's young people here, I won't say this bluntly, but basically you aren't valuable. I was going to say something else. You aren't valuable. You're 2/3 of a person or whatever different water, whatever the thing is, but for 350 years, you've been told you have no value whatsoever. I believe that 70% of black America is clinically undiagnosed depressed. And if that's true, and then let me now add a capstone. In 1865, March 3rd, 1865, Abraham Lincoln, probably the best president we've ever had, after the Emancipation Proclamation, after the Civil War, created the Freedmen's Bureau Act at his desk. And from that, he created the Freedmen's Bank. The Freedmen's Bank's mission was to teach freed slaves about money. Now, this is radical. You mean to tell me that the President of the United States of America thought the most important thing he could do after the Civil War and after emancipation to set people free was to introduce them to the free enterprise system? And if we had time, I would take you back 2 months before that and tell you about 40 Acres and a Mule, which also was tied to that. That's land and finance, leading to opportunity through knowledge and capital. The Latin root word capital comes from the Latin root word capitas, which means knowledge in the head. Has nothing to do with money. Lincoln was killed 5 weeks later. He put the bank across the street, by the way. And you're the first to hear this, but in December you'll see on the TV a ribbon cutting. I went to the Secretary of the Treasury, Lou, and I said to him, across the street from the White House and Treasury is a building called Treasury Annex. That was where the Freedmen's Bank was run. You can't tell me that the Freedmen's Bank building that the Treasury Annex is a less sexy or a more sexy name than the Freedmen's Bank building. Can you please change the name of the building? They said yes. So forevermore, starting the end of this year, the building across from the White House will be called the Freedmen's Bank building. Frederick Douglass, thank you. Frederick Douglass ran the bank. I saw somebody in the back giving me some time, so thank you for that heads up. Frederick Douglass ran the bank, put $10,000 of his own money in the bank, which is $20 million a day. It failed on his watch. He said the failure of this watch did more to set America back than 10 more years of slavery. And you've passed forward 100 years to 1968, Dr. King on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee, talking about the Poor People's Campaign, and he was killed before his first march in Washington, D.C. That was about all races of people, and Dr. King said this, and now this is right at your doorstep. Dr. King, civil rights leader, said this: you cannot legislate goodness, and you cannot pass a law to force someone to respect you. The only way to social justice in a capitalist country was economics and ownership, which is essentially what Shimon Peres said. And he was killed. And my mentor, Andrew Young, was sitting next to him. And the directions from the shooter, this is not public information, but Ambassador Young told me, the directions of the shooter, so says the FBI, was if you miss the dreamer, kill the strategist. So Dr. King passed it on to Andrew Young. Andrew Young has passed it on to a new generation. And Andrew Young has told me this: to live in a system of free enterprise, not to understand the rules of free enterprise, must be the definition of slavery. So you guys are modern leaders of a new movement. You have the keys to the one thing that can set anybody free on every continent, in every country in this world. There's never been a middle-class riot ever in American history. Ever, 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 ever. Only poor neighborhoods riot, ladies and gentlemen. Only poor neighborhoods riot, for the reasons I just described. We're sitting at a tipping point, and we need new small business startups. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish what Lincoln started. And I've created something that includes something called Hope Inside. And I'm going to put 1,000 Hope Inside branches inside of bank branches and credit unions and grocery stores and big box retailers and houses of faith and government offices. And there's a speaker here at your conference. It's not final yet, so I can't tell you who it is, but he's already committed to put a Hope Inside in one of his locations. But I got a Hope Inside going into Hyatt hotels, and I got a Hope Inside going into Atlanta Police Department. That's a whole other conversation, but it's not for the community, it's for the officers. I got a Hope Inside going into city halls, but most importantly, I have 260 locations that have already been ordered in 2 years in bank branches. And we're the only nonprofit in U.S. history ever allowed to operate inside of a bank branch. And what's our goal? To raise credit scores to 700. Here's my drop the mic moment. Nothing changes your life more today than God or love than moving your credit score 120 points. Half of employers require a credit check, probably you too. But all the neighborhoods that we care about, that we need this vision you're talking about to seep into, whether they're rural or urban or wherever they are, black, white, red, brown, and yellow, it's an average credit score of 500. So they're not black neighborhoods, they're not white neighborhoods, they're not Latino, they're 500 credit score neighborhoods. There's a $1 trillion industry, that's a T, ladies and gentlemen, a $1 trillion industry, which I call ghettoized financial services. A check cash next to a payday loan lender, next to a rent-to-own store, next to a title lender, next to a liquor store. Feeding on depression, financial illiteracy, and 500 credit scores. It's negative behavioral economics. There are more check cashers in America than Starbucks. There are more payday lenders in the state of Alabama than the entire country combined. And I went to my mother's neighborhood, middle-class neighborhood in Houston, and there's a payday lender every 150 yards. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't need to read a history book to be excited. You don't need to go look at what's going on in the Middle East to get enthralled. We need you to save America. And by the way, no different than Detroit needs to be saved because America needs Detroit to live again because he's part of our ethos. The world needs America to live again because we're not a country, we're an idea. I love you. I'm done.